This is a review for Fear the Walking Dead episode number 5. We had a lot of forward momentum this episode. The army is pulling out, we got to see the hospital, we met a unique new character, and Daniel got a whole lot more interesting. The breakdown of the military was great to see. I was really waiting to get to the part where we had soldiers deserting the army in the safe zones and other soldiers rebelling against their officers saying, you know, this is wrong what we're doing or you're taking it a little too far. So this episode was trying to show us that the army is collapsing or not able to hold the safe zones, but they did it in kind of an offhanded, weird sort of way. From what I'm kind of figuring out, Fear the Walking Dead likes to do a lot of telling and not necessarily showing, and I don't know if that has something to do with their budget. They can't afford to show, so they spend a lot of time telling and kind of making up for what they should have shown in other episodes. It's just in this episode we're seeing soldiers rebelling, soldiers deserting, soldiers starting to have issues of what they're doing and wanting to get back to their own family. And since we don't see downtown LA before this episode, we didn't really know things are getting out of hand and that the army is losing control of the situation in the area. Yeah, we know that happens from The Walking Dead, but for this show only, they really weren't doing a good job of showing the state of chaos or inability to defend the area. From what we saw, everything looked kind of honky-dory. And we learned from dialogue this episode that they don't have it under control. Soldiers have been up for over 50 hours. They lost a man last night. They're exhausted. Just now are hearing about the firefights going over the radio, at least from what I can remember. And it's a little bit jarring to me. I felt like there could have been a better way to show that the army was losing control before this. Like last episode when Travis goes up to Lieutenant Golf Guy and says, hey, my son thinks he might have saw a survivor in the outside the safe zone. Before Travis walks up, or as he walks up, they could have had the soldier say the same line, like, hey, you know, my men need a little bit of a break. We've been up for 50 hours. We lost a guy last night. And then Travis walks up and the soldier, you know, breaks away. I don't know. I feel like they could have slipped something in the previous episodes to show that things aren't going that great and not have it go from everything's great, the army's into control, to this episode, shit, we're losing control. The safe zones are just, they can't be held anymore. Just a little tease. Just a little tease would have been nice. But from this episode, we learned that at this point, they can't control LA anymore. The soldiers are pulling out, and they're most likely going to firebomb LA to take care of the problem. It makes sense from their perspective. If you can't secure and control the population and you don't have the resources to keep them alive, destroy them so they don't have to fight them later when they turn. It's terrible, but it's strategic. And I do like the military being involved with the group of survivors that we're going to be following around in Season 2, because they start off a little bit more knowledgeable than Rick and his group. Because they were around the military, Maddie's group knows that you turn when you die. You don't have to be bit, which is a big thing that Rick's group took a little bit to figure out. And that's the advantage to being around the military. You have more information and more knowledge about the outbreak. The disadvantage to being around the military is as soon as they can't keep you safe, they're going to eliminate you. So, you know, kind of have to weigh the pros and cons there. And that kind of makes me believe that's why we see so many clueless people in the beginning of the main show, because the people that were around the military and had this knowledge were wiped out. They never got to live or escape to let people know. I'm sure they did here and there, but for the most part, the people that were taken in by the military were eliminated when they couldn't secure them anymore. The people we see in The Walking Dead are the people that were outside the cities, outside the safe zones, that made it on their own, so they don't necessarily have the information the military had in the beginning, but they got it on their own and they didn't have to risk being executed. Characters this episode, I really liked Daniel. He was kind of showing his House Bolton tendencies. I never stopped to think what side Daniel was on during the war, and now he really has me curious about his character and the extent of the things he's done. And I hope it's just not piled on. He just doesn't tell this long story of everything he did. Just here and there, maybe Daniel does something that's maybe a little too far for Maddie or Travis, and he tells another story of something he had to do during the war, and then maybe another season we hear another story, and it just starts building this really complex, dark character. A flawed man that has done horrific things in the past to survive is exactly what this group needs. Daniel kind of reminds me of season 4 or 5 Rick, obviously a little different because they're two different characters, but he's kind of at the level that Rick is at now. He is going to do whatever it takes to survive and keep the people he cares about alive. And since we're starting at that place, how much darker and how much further is Daniel going to go, and who is going to keep him in check? And I wonder if there's going to be some type of dynamic between Maddie and Daniel. Madison is going to become the leader, and Daniel is going to do the things that needs to be done that not necessarily a leader can do, but someone else takes care of it for her. And I think their relationship could actually become really interesting, especially as, or if, she becomes the leader of the group. If she doesn't become the leader and Daniel doesn't, I don't really know who would. It wouldn't be necessarily a Governor and Merle relationship, but maybe a Rick-Carol type relationship forming with those two, where Rick is Maddie and Carol is Daniel. I don't know. Travis, I've decided Travis is the paladin of the group. That fucking paladin that ruins everybody's fun because he always has to be lawful good about everything. Except paladins in your Pathfinder party actually have a use. Travis just... everything he is, the person he is at his very core, his morals, his personality, just isn't made for this world or the world that Fear the Walking Dead is becoming. He needs to adapt or die. And right now, Travis isn't willing to adapt. He's not willing to give up his life or his morals. He doesn't realize that the world has changed yet. And I don't know if he is going to change or if he's going to resist it for as long as he can. And I think it really drove it home, his lack of changing or adapting to the situation, when he's asked by the lieutenant, "Were you a teacher?" And Travis responds, "I still am." Chris and Alicia, enjoy the little things. Kind of a random thought. It's probably not going to happen. We know in the comics there was a kid named Chris who was in love with another teenager, and then at one point they decided they wanted to be together, and they had a suicide pact. It went horribly wrong, but that was when they first learned that you don't have to be bit to come back. At least from my memory, that's when they learned it. They could have learned a little bit before, but I'm pretty sure it was that moment that they learned, you die, you come back as a zombie. And I'm kind of wondering, is that what we're sort of seeing a setup here? Will Chris and Alicia become closer, and then at one point Chris is like, "Hey, there's no point anymore, you and I, hey, we should snuff out our lives and be together"? I can't see Alicia doing that, but I could sort of see Chris doing it. He seems like the bandwagon type guy. I hope they don't go there, but it's a thought, I guess. Liza in the hospital wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I thought for sure we were going to see people being experimented on, but nope. We just had relatively healthy people in a cage and people trying to keep sick individuals alive. So, guess I was wrong about that. I wonder if the soldiers will gun down the people in the cages before they leave, or if they'll just leave them to die in the cages. Smooth talking guy became interesting in, what, 7 minutes? That is how you develop a character. He sounds like a bit of a psychopath, and I'm willing to see where he takes Nick and the things he's able to talk Nick into doing. And I wouldn't mind Nick and him palling around for season 2, even if Nick and him join with Maddie's group and you have him whispering to Nick saying, "Hey, you know, we need to do this to survive. Hey, do this and we can get it fixed for you, but you gotta do this for me." And then eventually maybe he takes control or, you know, works it in a way that he starts to become the leader, and then there's that conflict of dealing with him. Just some thoughts. Please just don't kill him all of a sudden. I think they can take him to some pretty unique places if they try. They can develop this character and make him out to be a villain, but a villain that's a little less obvious than the governor in your face that we saw with The Walking Dead. This guy's kind of standing to the side, whispering in your ear, getting things done. Lastly, the ending with the stadium. I really hope there's a payoff to that. I'm wondering when they bomb or firebomb the city, if somehow they get out and then there's just a huge herd and dealing with that problem. I can't imagine Daniel unleashing them unless he discovers his wife is dead and just loses it. But what would be the point? Yeah, a mental breakdown doesn't lead to sound decisions, but what would he gain from unleashing them? A distraction as the army pulls out? I think Daniel going to the stadium was just a way of him confirming the soldier's story. Also, I'd imagine there are other buildings containing large group of walkers just like the stadium. One more episode to go. I think we're going to end the finale with the firebombing of LA, or maybe it's going to happen in the middle or beginning, and then we're going to see Maddie and their group on their own. What did you think? Did you love, hate the episode? Do you think Lieutenant Golf Guy is dead? And if you were a soldier, would you stay and defend, or would you say hell no and try to go back and see or rescue your family?